Welcome to Series 4 of the Public Interest Technology Colloquium. We are delighted to be back with this new series and have an engaging program lined up. My name is Katina Michael, and I'm the Director of the Society Policy Engineering Collective in the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University, and I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of the IEEE Transactions on Technology and Society. I'm joined today by my co-host, Dr. Robert Abbas, who's a senior lecturer in the School of Business at the University of Wollongong, Australia, and the Socio-Technical Systems Technical Committee Chair at the IEEE. Robert and I would like to acknowledge the work and support of Melissa Waite and the events team at the College of Global Futures at ASU. Now, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on our colloquium to date. We journeyed from Series 1, which focused on values, responsible innovation, and COVID-specific technological responses, to Series 2, which centered on storytelling, imagination, and participatory design methodologies, to Series 3, which emphasized the global perspective with respect to the social, regulatory, ethical, and technological considerations relevant to design, development, and the delivery of technology in the public interest. In this series, we illuminate a path toward transdisciplinarity, hosting international speakers who will share their perspectives on experts and expertise, innovation ecosystems, multi-stakeholder approaches, and opportunities and challenges relating to addressing complex societal challenges. We're delighted to be hosting today Professor Elias Carayannis. Dr. Elias Carayannis is a full professor of science, technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship, as well as co-founder and co-director of the Global and Entrepreneurial Finance Research Institute, Jeffrey, and director of the European Union Research Center at the School of Business of the George Washington University in Washington, DC. Dr. Carayannis' teaching and research activities focus on strategic government university industry R&D partnerships, technology road mapping, technology transfer and commercialization, international science and technology policy, technological entrepreneurship, and regional economic development. Today, Professor Carayannis will present on helical architectures, the emerging unified theory of helical architectures, UTOHA, democratic and sustainable knowledge economies and societies, and more. Welcome, Professor Elias, to the Public Interest Technology Colloquium. We're so honored to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, it's really wonderful. There are so many shared areas of interest. I will share some thoughts, and this is ongoing research, some themes that, as you see, are interwoven and hopefully complementary and reinforcing. There is some complexity, but also hopefully we'll have some clarity. What this is about is really most of the things we're experiencing daily. We are confronted increasingly, individually and as societies, by challenges that are compounding, and they are converging, and they are rather complex, as I said already, and challenging to address and cope with. And hopefully we'll have a better tomorrow, but this will require some concerted action and some reinvention. We'll talk a lot about digital transformation. I'll talk about digital to analog, in effect, emphasizing the need for human-centric, not just technocentric philosophies in design of technology. But to come back to our broader context here, the title is about democracy, environment, and technology, how they interact, interplay, and what we can do to have a better tomorrow, as I said, concerning both democracy and the environment. Technology, and of course, in the context of public interest technology, should be broadly viewed as a concept and set of technologies, including, of course, artificial intelligence applications. The interest and the focus and the context is about, of course, theory, but also policy, practice, and politics. The issues we're discussing relate to not just the theory, but also the policy, practice, and politics considerations, because they all feed off each other and they impact each other. Just a brief mention of some of the related projects I've been involved in with colleagues in terms of research, macro, meso, and micro levels. And these cover different areas that touch on innovation. In particular, you see possibly the term scarce here. This is, in fact, a term we've created, and I have trademarked, in fact. This is strategic knowledge, arbitrage, and serendipity effects. And we developed this concept and related underpinning concepts to address the entrepreneurial ecosystem dynamics and open that black box, if you wish, trying to deal with and open the black box of innovation, trying to develop grounded theory, understanding and anticipating and controlling, to some extent, discontinuities and disruptions. The quadruple and quintuple innovation helix concepts are also themes we'll talk about tonight briefly. And these are frameworks, tools we've developed to both study, understand, and also propose how, why, and where policy and practice intervention should be formulated and applied for a better result, for more effective and efficient, more efficacious, if you wish, ecosystem design. There are different platforms, publishing platforms, journals, book series, and so forth. I'll be happy to further discuss for those of you who may be or are doctoral candidates or certainly interested in research and publication. I'm happy to also come back to these themes. Now, for more context, one word is democracy, or operant term tonight, and the other is the environment. There's an interview I gave, in fact, in the fall of 20, as how and why I consider democracy and the environment endangered species. That has been, of course, an issue for some time now, but it has become increasingly apparent, unfortunately, recently, and recent developments in Europe and elsewhere. So the point is that it's important to figure out and always try to make the world safe for democracy, but also democracy safe for the world, and figure out ways for increased shared prosperity as a foundation for sustainable democracy, peace, and environment per se. They all go up or down together, unfortunately. And so in that sense, this concept, this is from a 2005 book of mine where I talk about smart development from socio-economic being to techno-economic becoming, implies and relates to how to, in a sense, advance and ideally leapfrog even, figure out ways and means, again, policies, practices, and shape politics so that a country and a society, while maintaining its democratic institutions, can actually progress substantially and move from subsistence-based to knowledge-driven, not just knowledge-based, but actually an economy and a society that is very intensely and creatively producing new knowledge and solutions based on that knowledge, whether it's high technology or other types of artifacts that are adding value. So it's not just about high tech. So it's about moving from natural or perhaps even artificial scarcity to technology and knowledge-enabled abundance. And there are a lot of issues here. In some cases, we have abundance and we intentionally create conditions of scarcity so that certain interests can benefit more than the public good. Of course, this is a broader, bigger discussion, but that also relates to this line of thought. Now, in addition, continuing with this discussion of the local, regional, and global context, we have systems, networks, and sectors of innovation that are converging, as we know, and they're both globalizing but also localizing. And this is sort of a pendulum effect, a phenomenon that over time moves in one direction or the other more. We've had globalization for some time, and of course, recently there's been much more of a decoupling set of trends and tendencies for geopolitical, geoeconomic, and of course, geotechnological reasons. The breakdown of supply chains, global supply chains, has actually made that, manifested the need for more localization, for instance, in addition to other reasons. So the point is, how can we better synthesize, again, sustainable, financially, socially, and environmentally solutions that build on technologies and advance, again, the public interest. And when I say public interest, and I'll talk about that later, in fact, we should be thinking of not just public, but in fact, public, private, people, and planet interest, right? So this is P4IT in a way, not just PIT. The knowledge, the ways and means that knowledge is produced has been studied for some time, and Novotny and Gibbons and others have talked about mode 1 and mode 2 knowledge production systems. That sort of reflects the move from linear to non-linear chain link types of innovation models. And we introduced the mode 3 knowledge production system concept to emphasize the significance and the need for higher order learning that relates to thinking and approaches that are both transdisciplinary and also very transformative in their essence. You don't just acquire facts and figures. You don't even just change how you learn, but you change how you learn how to learn. Okay, so it's learning to learn, and learning to learn how to learn. And the point is that this is, as you see, a multilateral, multimodal, multinodal, and multi-layered model. And this is the foundation for the quadruple helix: government, university, industry, and civil society. I'll show you the graphic shortly. And then, of course, the quintuple, which includes the environment, adds the environment to this. The way knowledge is created, shared, diffused, absorbed, and transformed is through processes of co-petition, co-specialization, and co-evolution, as well as, of course, co-creation. And so the question here is, should we, how should we design our policies, practices, and shape our politics to enable, in fact, facilitate, but also accelerate, trigger, catalyze, and accelerate smart growth? That often implies and even requires what we call leapfrogging strategies. You can't just go through the entire process that other countries have gone through. And in fact, given the environmental issues and implications of development, that often tends to be dirty business, literally polluting business. The capacity to leapfrog and move across stages of development without necessarily incurring all the costs and externalities and negative externalities concerning certainly pollution, but even corruption and other effects, is certainly very desirable. In addition to accelerating that growth, to ensure that you capture the imagination of your citizens and you maintain, if you wish, their confidence. Populism feeds off cynicism, disappointment, and despair, as we know all too well. And this is one of the biggest threats to democracies. If you're following politics in Europe right now, it will be an interesting year next year in the US as well. But in Europe, we've had very interesting developments in Sweden, and we'll get elections in this coming Sunday in Italy, where extreme right parties may actually wield significant disproportionate influence, and that is of great concern. So the point here being is that skipping the transitioning stages is very desirable, but it's harder to accomplish than to envision and dream. Technology can play a very important role, but it also is a question of goodness of fit, in a way, of institutions, capabilities, absorptive capacities, if you wish, for individuals, societies, and economies, and appropriate policies and practices. And on that, we'll talk, if as time allows, about the ideas of industry and society 5.0 and going beyond those. So let's talk about the essential elements of my discussion, my presentation, and our discussion tonight. First of all, the what. Industry 5.0 and society 5.0 and beyond. Industry 4.0, of course, is the established standard framework for introducing digitalization, as it's called, digital transformation. I like to emphasize this point here, being an engineer myself and being very much aware of what digitalization means. It is a type of filtering, and in effect, what that means is you're pruning out, you're cutting out, you're excluding nuances. So if you map that into the socioeconomic, sociopolitical, and also socio-technical context, that has very serious implications, even dangerous implications. The impoverishing, if you wish, of our discourse, of our thinking, our dialogue, our dialectics, is very tricky business. We need to be very careful, and this is something we've seen in general with the advent of the internet, and certainly the blossoming of the social media. And in effect, what I'd like to think of the chaining in a way of our thought, and the impoverishment again of our language of thought, trying to tweet our thoughts in 140 or whatever characters are allowed nowadays. This is extremely efficient, but also it's extremely limiting. And so the digitalization cuts out the nuances, and they can be very significant parts of the message. This is the idea of moving from digital to analog, not just analog to digital. You do want the digitalization, but you want to ensure that actually it is balanced and complemented and enriched as needed by the nuances, as I call them. Okay, so that's what I mean with moving from technocentric to human-centric design, theories, policies, practices, and politics. Okay, so this relates or sort of is underpinned by several publications. I've shared this with Professor Michael, and so I can share those with you. They talk about these different ideas and how our ongoing research has been highlighting and elucidating some of the underlying dimensions and implications. Then next is the how. We talked about the what. The how is about tools, ways, and means for achieving that digital to analog and analog to digital approach, balanced approach, building on the industry and society 5.0 and beyond, using specifically these frameworks and an integrated approach. That's what the UTOHA is about. It's an acronym, emerging unified theory of helical or helix architectures. Okay, so the idea is, rather than talking about or trying to sort of shoehorn or pigeonhole our perspectives and our design thinking into specific frameworks, triple helix, quadruple, and quintuple, and I'd like to discuss briefly why it matters whether we talk about the triple or the quintuple helix. The triple helix, as you probably know, is and all of these helices, of course, are inspired by the double helix, the DNA model in biology. In fact, recently it has been found that in nature there is also instances of quadruple helices. Of course, symmetry, for obvious reasons, has to exist in nature for biological sustainability. But beyond that, the triple helix is really a model based on government, university, industry perspectives and interactions, and it's very much a top-down model. And I have related publications where I discuss the differences, including a recent one, which is where we talked about the UTOHA, the Unified Theory of Helical Architectures, and the difference, therefore, between the triple helix and the quadruple and quintuple is that the quadruple adds civil society, the bottom-up perspective, and focusing on the role, the needs, expectations, and capabilities of and talents of citizens, groups, and so forth, grassroots movements, and society as a whole. And then, of course, the quintuple takes the environment into consideration. So the quintuple innovation helix is the more complete one, but there is a difference across these. And what we try to do, as I talked before about efficacious ecosystems design, is under constraints to figure out best possible, best in breed, so to speak, and that is effectively sub-optimization of policies and practices using agile design thinking methodologies and related toolkits. We have a publication on that, the ambidextrous, robust, and resilient impact assessment of sustainable smarter specialization strategies. This is about the application context is smarter specialization strategies in the European theater. And then, of course, another related paper is in the European Journal of Operations Research, OR for entrepreneurial ecosystems, where we look at different approaches to defining problems and related to ecosystems design, and then using and compiling and assessing different methodologies. The why do all these things matter? Well, they do because, as I said earlier, I do believe that democracy and the environment should be considered endangered species. And if we don't adopt a clear mindset as to what that is, what it means, and what it implies for our futures and our children's futures, we will be in dire straits. And therefore, this is very clearly an issue of developed democracies versus emerging autocracies. And ironically, as we speak, in a sense, there are leaders of developed democracies gathering in New York, in the United Nations, which has become more of a divided nations nowadays, unfortunately. And then, of course, there is the gathering in Samarkand of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with all the autocrats feting each other and celebrating their power, I guess, for now. So let's continue then. These are just references, again, that your professor can share with you, has already received from me, and it's worth looking into those because, for instance, there's a couple of the end readings about the future of the internet, the Web3 or metaverse, taking the issues that I raised before about, including about the pruning out of nuances. to the next level. And I'm talking about the metaverse paradigm, so to speak. And then, of course, write up about Bill Gates and his concerns. And there's, of course, Elon Musk and his paranoia about AI and so forth. So in a more hopefully concrete way, I have proposed, and this is published in one on the webpage of one of my the journals that I edit, the Journal of the Knowledge Economy by Springer. This what we call the New Earth Initiative. This was published, in fact, last fall before the events in Ukraine and so forth. It is about, and it certainly was inspired or triggered by the recent COPs meeting in Glasgow. And this is about figuring out ways that we can, in a way, leapfrog our problems and not just be reactive, but proactive. And that's why I talk about how, let's figure out how to reduce the average Earth temperature increase, not just the rate of increasing of the temperature. So the point being here is that we need to, as I say in the red comments, we need to engage as a species proactively in higher order learning also from other species in our planet to pursue a coherent, consistent, and continuous. And this is a big challenge, by the way, regarding democracies. And an ironic advantage the autocracies have is that the politicians, the leaders in general of democratic regimes, are inevitably focused on the next elections. There should be some way to balance the short term with the long term, because this is a long-term game, and this is about, as I call it, and in fact, it involves everybody on the planet, whether they're more or less democratically minded. There should be a global green growth strategy, promoting negative carbon footprint, leveraging technologies in the public interest, and things like geoengineering. Of course, there's a lot of discussion about the risks of playing God in that sense. At the same time, avoiding risk is not a risk management strategy, as we know well. So we should be making calculated choices and taking calculated risks. In addition to geoengineering, there is nuclear fusion, another type of technology that, assuming that we can handle the underlying risks, is truly green technology, and one that has been benefiting in the last few years substantially by technological advances. And it's pretty interesting timing. We've had some publications in the last 2 or 3 years, including in the IEEE transactions in engineering management about fusion. There's an article with the title Fusion Diffusion. There's a discussion there about the potential and implications and, of course, risks of fusion technologies, nuclear fusion, what's happening now in Europe, and the energy blackmail issues certainly highlights that, I think. So we need to figure out ways to have different initiatives that are obviously proposing or attempting to advance different powers globally, whether it's the US or China or what have you. They inevitably will coexist. They need to figure out ways to collaborate, as I say, within a competitive context, but they need to engage, and there should be a way to do so without getting to very negative, disruptive effects. Hopefully, as I say, through balanced, ecologically friendly, strategic, and transparent policies, practices, and politics. Now, some examples of or use cases, if you wish, of the New Earth Initiative. I won't discuss in great detail these. Each one of those is an opportunity for study and research, and in fact, doctoral research. Radically reinventing cost-benefit analysis. In fact, in the US, the Office of Science and Technology Policy in Washington has been promoting new ways to take into account, sort of do more environmental accounting. And this is somewhat related. We need to develop and advance in a thinking beyond the box manner. And again, these are terms I've coined to highlight, denote the difference between thinking inside the box, thinking outside the box, which is still related to referring to some kind of box. So there's a bias of a previous framework to thinking beyond the box, unleashing your creativity and imagination. Of course, not forgetting the pre-existing boxes, so to speak, but actually allowing yourself to really do ideation, as we call it. So we need to think in that manner in terms of metrics, measurement, meaning, monitoring, and management issues, approaches and methodologies, leveraging technology like big data analytics and semantics in the instant economy context, to know in real time what's going on and what we need to do, rather averaging out things and through the digitalization process, filtering out nuances. We should welcome and leverage the nuances in that sense and in real time. Then it's about adopting, the second example is adopting and leveraging broadly the power of knowledge, innovation, entrepreneurship ecosystems. And I have a use case here. I don't know if I'll have the time to discuss in detail today, but this is a stream and significant stream of our ongoing research where we use intelligent agents modeling and other methods to represent ecosystems, innovation, and entrepreneurship ecosystems, and look at ways and means and the triggers, catalysts, and accelerators of knowledge creation, diffusion, and use to identify where value is best created, most effectively and efficiently, and used. And the idea here is to, along with creating the proper environments and contexts with the proper policies and practices, to catalyze and encourage entrepreneurial and innovative action initiative from the bottom up to create new value and in a sustainable way. A third example is this time variable, nonlinear, scale and scope driven, full spectrum, positive to negative tax rate policies. I mean, there's a big deal with the R&D tax credits and renewing them or not, and whether the US should have industrial policy or not, and all these things, including, by the way, the bipartisan model. Democracies are by nature inevitably much more complex. And while I do understand and respect tradition and the wisdom of the founding fathers, so to speak, in the US and the Constitution, we may really need to revisit some things. And that has become very apparent in the recent years with populism and other things. I mean, what happened on January 6, 2021, it was a major wake-up call. I'm talking about what happened on the Capitol. So the point here is that we should really allow for technology to guide, again, our policies in the same manner. Nowadays, there's a lot of fretting about interest rates and what the Fed should or should not be doing and when and how fast. And in itself, the Fed is more than 100 years old. It's very pertinent, very important of an institution, but in many ways, it may be outdated. And I know they have the knowledge and the tools, cutting edge, but we may actually need bleeding edge technologies there, again, in the public interest, to figure out smarter ways to deal with, predicting, preventing, and preempting even inflation. So anyway, let me return to the themes I have listed here. A broad spectrum of geoengineering technologies. I talked about that before, earlier, and this should not be a few isolated experiments or pilots. It should be truly global, involving all the major countries, the US, EU, China, Russia, India, and really figure out with a scale and scope that are appropriate how to bring about true change in taking control of our environmental future, so to speak. The EU could play a major role in this regard, as I call it here, GeoStep bridge, geostrategic, technological, economic, and political type of bridge and launchpad across continents, and also, superpower divides. And finally, in addition to the top-down policies and practices outlined above, figure out a way to scale through the continued triggering and scaling up of bottom-up initiatives involving individuals, associations, and networks, leveraging different techniques and methodologies, technology like crowdsourcing, but also crowdstorming and crowdfunding, AI-enabled Internet of Things modalities to allow targeted, dynamically adaptive, and powerfully effective interventions, predicting, preventing, and preempting polluting actions and in effective attempts at pollution control and mitigation. So avoiding, of course, we always need to learn, and in this write-up I have on the New Earth Initiative, I have this saying, or this thought that I came up with, to err is human, to learn is sublime. Well, we should definitely be learning from our mistakes, but we should, given the context here, we should do all we can to minimize error and certainly avoid error repetition. Okay, if you still are with me, I will go now into more specific ideas and concepts discussion. First of all, a caveat here about the innovator, and a comment from our friend Machiavelli. You have, in fact, enemies, not friends, among those you're trying to disrupt. Until, of course, and this is related to the concept that Thomas Kuhn and others have written about, science of the nature of scientific revolutions and so forth, the paradigm shift concept. There's tremendous resistance. Until there's enough critical mass, then everything changes to your advantage and benefit. And so you're on top of the hill, then it's easier going, I guess. Briefly, a view of the different frameworks, starting with Industry 4.0, which is much more technocentric, as we know, and we see the different components, systems integration, additive manufacturing, and so forth, Internet of Things. Then 5.0 expands, advances the Industry 4.0. The European Commission in January 21 published a paper or white paper on Industry 5.0, recognizing its significance. I'm among those who have been writing about this for some time now. It's about moving from a technocentric to more of a human-centric perspective, making sure technology becomes and remains part of the solution and doesn't become part of the problem, including risks of AI rebelliousness, let's say. Then, of course, there's this concept coming out of Japan of Society 5.0, along with the technology, the evolution of technological frameworks like Industry 1.0, 2.0, and so forth. There is a similar progression of society frameworks, paradigms. And the idea of Society 5.0 being one where what we call, as we will see, super smart society. Technology, again, is truly at the service of the individual and helps minimize the gaps, helps move from natural scarcity to artificial abundance increasingly, as I mentioned earlier. And you see here a map of all these technologies and how they can help improve our lives, hopefully. Now, in the context of our discussion, smart sustainability is the overarching goal, and that means eco-innovation. I actually don't like using that term. I feel that innovation by its essence should be ecologically friendly. There should not be innovations that are not green, so to speak, but the reality is otherwise, of course. So we end up using this term. And so for key enabling technologies, biotech, nanotech, Internet of Things, AI, and robotics help bring about change and hopefully move us. Of course, the UN Secretary Gutierrez just today talked about how everything is not going so well and how we have all kinds of problems in the world. That certainly highlights the need for a renewed and redoubling of our efforts. The UN Agenda 2030, they recognize the role of innovation, and this is the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this is the theme of our discussion so far. This includes dimensions like, or types of innovation like broad-based innovation, open innovation. We have been writing for some time now about targeted open innovation, recognizing and highlighting the need to recognize priorities and enlightened self-interest that in a way necessitate caveats on the degree of openness, so to speak. Lead user innovation, user-oriented innovation, in local targeted open innovation. This is what I just discussed. Targeted open innovation in a global, local context. And then, of course, the frameworks, the quadruple and the quintuple helix, are very pertinent, in our opinion, in this discussion. Digital social innovation for the good of society, and using digital technologies and digitalization, again, leavened, balanced, to ensure that there is enough of a human-centric perspective and emphasis. And the definition of a social innovation, it's about creating social capacity, solving social problems, promoting collaborative teamwork, and also producing social justice. And these, of course, are all important goals and pursuits. Digital social innovation in particular synthesizes the innovation process, the social world, and digital ecosystems. And it's about co-creating knowledge and solutions for different needs. And of course, using the digital capabilities at a scale that was not possible to imagine earlier. Now, so that highlights scores the meaning and definition of Society 5.0, or super smart society, where the various needs of society are finally differentiated, and you know, it's ironic in a sense for those who are mindful of political history, so to speak, in the evolution of movements. Someone many years ago said, from everyone according to their abilities to everyone according to their needs. And of course, that led to very tragic implementations of ideology into regime. I'm talking about Lenin and Soviet empire. But still, there is, I think, some validity that cannot be disputed in the fact that, you know, having the capacity to address needs for people and being available, the solutions to their needs being available when they need them, which means that in some ways there's some kind of predicting, preempting and preventing and preempting in action. And there's an element of Big Brother in this that, of course, needs to be, again, moderated. That is very important. That is very significant, especially for aging societies. So this is sort of the transition over time of the different generations of society frameworks, from society 1.0, the very beginning, to 5.0 in the present, and emerging into the future. Aiming for a prosperous, human-centered society. Society 4.0, by juxtaposition, contrast, is an information society that realizes increasing value added by connecting intangible assets as information networks. This is much more technocentric view. And what, again, super smart society is about is building on all these things that we discussed. Some of the examples of the New Earth Initiative, use cases or applications for policies and practices, are building blocks for this type of super smart society. And in a nutshell, what this is about is the systemization of services and projects and coordination across multiple systems. And so it's a very system-centric approach, a smart bridge, effectively, between the technocentric and human-centric perspectives. And this also allows us to look at the different components of both societies and economies, how private sector, universities, government, and civil society are interacting and interwoven. And this is exactly the implication of the helical approaches and architectures to optimize, maximize, and optimize the knowledge interfaces and interactions across all the different essential building blocks of societies and economies. Here you have, in fact, the example of the different walls, ministries and agencies, legal systems, technologies, human resources, social acceptance, and how this approach now develops, builds bridges, and sort of breaks through these walls. Okay. So the ecosystem of innovation, I'll talk about, if there's time, the use case along with Scarce. The other use case I have is University 5.0, sort of the vision of an emerging paradigm of universities. I was very much inspired by Michael Crow's writings about 15, 20 years ago, and since have developed about 12 years ago or 15 years ago, this idea of the fractal research, education, innovation ecosystem, effectively a model of a university that is, in essence, a collection and a collection of nodes, or a collection or a network of clusters. Its cluster being transdisciplinary research, education, and innovation. This is what I mean with the fractal research, education, and innovation ecosystem. There is self-similar structures and self-similarities embedded in the design of both a university and also all universities that make up this ecosystem of research, education, and innovation. And the fractal nature is reflected in the fact that there's this self-similar repetition of building blocks. There's modules or nodes that make up a university. There's no more departments, schools, and so forth. I can understand how that may make a traditional academic, perhaps a normal academic, rather disturbed. But we should really not just talk about transdisciplinarity, but start enacting it. Because among other things, all components, government, university, industry, and of course civil society, are under tremendous pressure nowadays, and they need to reinvent themselves and help with all kinds of transformations, not just the digital one, which is the least of our challenges and opportunities, and should be the list of our concerns, in fact. The other transformations are very important, and education, the university is at the heart of it. In fact, I have a representation of the quintuple innovation helix, and the university is at the heart of it, surrounded by government, industry, civil society, and then the environment. So this is how that, there you go. This is how this is reflected. Academia, industry, government, society, environment, the university is at the core. It is really the engine of new knowledge, but it's more than that. In fact, about 15 years ago, I was reflecting on who we are, the academics, I mean. And I came up with this definition, for better or worse, that I think has some relevance. Academics could be considered, perhaps should be, or strive to become entrepreneurs of the mind in the business of growing people, spiritually and intellectually. So this is, I think, a very important mission. And we talk about the third mission and so forth, outreach and the like. We should start with ourselves and how we structure academia and this fractal research, education, and innovation ecosystem model that I have written about, and it's available if people are interested, is, I think, one way to go. Here's an example of how the quadruple helix can be practically implemented and embedded in policies and practices. And of course, one can add to that the environmental issues, the sustainability considerations. But we can think of the four dimensions of the quadruple helix: government, university, industry, civil society on the vertical, and then technological, institutional, behavioral, and cultural issues. And we provide examples of what these may be. Now, think back into the New Earth Initiative and the M5 example I use: metrics, measurement, management, monitoring, and how we need to reinvent all these, how we measure and so forth. This is one of the cases where this comes into play and place here. And then in addition, the nonlinear taxation policies, you see here many cells where that can be embedded and implemented. And so the environment in connection, so the quintuple helix in connection with society and industry 5.0 is really highlights the relevance and usefulness of these paradigms, and in fact trying to go even and beyond. It sets the stage. The need for a more sustainable development and climate change challenges are reflected in the quintuple helix model that adds explicitly the fifth dimension, the environment, and sets the stage for sustainability priorities and considerations, so that nature is central and equivalent to all other considerations. And this is going back to the accounting and reinventing the accounting and the measurement and management practices. Now, the European Commission, the European Union, has adopted the quadruple helix, and the challenge and opportunity in their policies and frameworks, the challenge and opportunity is to introduce the quintuple helix explicitly, and along with industry and society 5.0, make them components of, again, policy making and practice shaping. And I hope the same will apply to the US and other democracies. These two models play an important role in embedding societal issues and environmental considerations. So democracy and the environment being species, so to speak, that they need to be safeguarded are very much about, and they highlight the need for having this perspective in how we shape our policies and how design our technologies from the beginning, from the get-go, right? Some more of these graphical representations looking at different helices, how they're embedded in each other, and how what is added in a way to provide and produce the additional dimensions. We start with the knowledge economy with triple helix, and then knowledge society and knowledge democracy in the quadruple helix, and then social ecology in the quintuple. I have covered these to some extent. And one aspect I didn't mention is the arts, the role of the arts, and I mentioned creativity, but in particular the role of the arts and artistic research as a driver, so to speak, of these dynamics and the knowledge creation and sharing, top down and bottom up. And this is in fact, we have a book series called Arts, Research, Innovation, and Society, where we look at issues of the role of the arts on technology and society, and vice versa. The idea, and this is an important point of reference here, we talk about, and we list here, democracy of knowledge. One other of the book series I have with Palgrave called Democracy, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship for Growth. So the acronym could be DIE for growth, I guess, is really interested in looking at long-term effects and trends, comparing more autocratic versus more democratic regimes, and whether the former or the latter tend to be or prove to be better innovators over the long term. And this is not, again, just about technology for profit maximization in the short term, high-tech startups and so forth. That is a big part of it, but it's not everything. That is a component of certainly industrial policy and technologies that are developed as infrastructural public interest technologies over the long term, and how they can transform, enhance the productivity and capabilities of a society and an economy. It is an open question whether democracy, and again, the issues, the short term is with the elections versus the lack of the lack of openness, transparency, and responsiveness in an autocracy. Of course, there are nuances or degrees of more democratic or more autocratic regimes. The question there being is which one would prove to be more competent as an innovator. And there are interesting historical examples. I don't have these slides here, but I have in the past discussed and presented the case of China in the Middle Ages, how it was rather ahead of most of the world, certainly Europe at the time, until in the 1400s, somehow it started becoming inward, insulated, and backwards increasingly. And fell behind and became colonized, and we know the story, but the point is that there was this switch at some point, and it's perplexing how and why it happened, and whether it might happen again, whether in a democratic or an autocratic context. This is really about the rise and decline of great powers and so forth. There's all kinds of interesting studies on that. The model, so to speak, the different ways to look at the quadruple helix, we have different perspectives. The Fraunhofer network of research and development facilities, Intel. So this has been broadly adopted. I mentioned the European Commission, but companies and other organizations have been adopting and using the quadruple helix, innovation helix framework. This is a sort of a gyroscopic view of the quintuple helix. What is of interest and relevance here is the how we design and how we study the interfaces across the different threads, the 5 threads, so to speak, here of the quintuple innovation helix framework, and how we design and then test sort of the filters across the knowledge interfaces. So different views, different perspectives can be useful in different ways. This one, for instance, so what overlaps we may have and what conditions and conditionalities may exist. For instance, we denote smart growth being at the heart of it all, where we have presumably, if not optimal, suboptimal design and operation of the different components of the quadruple helix, and of course, in a rather sustainable manner regarding the environment. This is now connecting the quintuple helix with the Industry 5.0 using multi-criteria decision analysis, MCDA, to identify priorities and again sub-optimize the design of the structures and the interfaces. Again, that's connected to some of the examples use cases I referred to earlier, like the capacity to use technology and artificial intelligence, in particular, real-time dynamically adaptive solutions that are, again, rather proactive and also predictive, preventive and preemptive in terms of managing risk and addressing issues of solving problems. So in that context, along with Industry 5.0 and Society 5.0, we have Risk Management 5.0. And this is also, there's another related publication we have on that recently, leveraging AI, blockchain, and Internet of Things technologies to both design smarter solutions and manage the side effects of those. And that certainly would apply to some extent to, for instance, nuclear fusion solutions, for instance, if one chose to move along these lines. A couple of thoughts here on the future now. Whether AI will truly introduce high degrees of unemployment. Just before the onset of COVID, there was great concern about this. Time will show exactly how things will play out. It seems to me that there is going to be such a qualitative transformation that the direct impact of AI, qualitative transformation in the way we live, work, and function in our societies and economies, that the impact of AI will not be as apparent. It will not be easy to identify substitution effects, so to speak, and dislocation effects. At the same time, there's already clear evidence that, again, there is an imperative for a qualitative transformation. And in connection with this, the great resignation, so to speak, wave right after the peak of the COVID pandemic may be related. We have done some work on the future of labor and the future of education in this regard. As part of the book in the Arts Research Innovation Society book series I mentioned. Then the other issue is artificial intelligence and human intelligence. There is room and need for synthesis, sort of a bionic, or what we call centaur intelligence. How that will play out, of course, is not clear yet. And again, this is great, in my mind, significance for public interest technologies that already, lead users or leading users, perhaps, who have been embedding technology in their bodies. They've become, to some extent, bionic in that sense. Then we have democracy, knowledge, and innovation. Our position and premise is that democracy, and the more high the quality of a democracy is, and that relates to transparency, representation, and participation factors or dimensions, is an innovation enabler. And therefore, by extension, autocracies tend to be, in a way, suppressors of innovation, or albeit they, as we note, cross-benefit from innovation and all the successes of democracy. Again, to quote, I think Lenin again, he said that the capitalists will sell us the rope that will hang them with. So, an ironic case in point that is now playing out to the consternation of Europe and the world is that, unfortunately, countries like Germany, they chose to benefit from cheap Russian natural gas, oil, and so forth to produce their great products and services and sell them to China to help that country become an emerging autocratic superpower. So, very Faustian dilemma and choice. Now, over the medium to long term, our fundamental belief and premise is that true and transparent democracy is a sine qua non for smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. So we said about 10 years ago, and I think it remains relevant, in fact, prescient to some extent. We felt then, and we still believe, that the helical models, in fact, the unified helical architecture approach in theory can better serve and architect a better tomorrow. All right, so real quick now, 2 use cases. Scarce in action. These are concepts that we developed, again, about 15 years ago. A term we've actually trademarked, the acronym, pronounced scarce, like the word in English doesn't denote rarity, may denote, of course, something that is valuable, hopefully. We consider those real option drivers. So this is about drivers of real options, real versus financial options. And in other words, making choices and taking calculated risks in whether and how and when to develop a certain technology, or for that matter, start a company or do other things that relate to under conditions and under risk, and with risk and uncertainty in the background, make decisions to obviously maximize the value added of what you're doing. In the context of co-petition, co-evolution, co-specialization, in other words, you don't operate in a vacuum, whether you're in an ecosystem or in a society or an economy. As you operate and you take action, there is reaction, and you're always competing for scarce resources and opportunities with others. You may choose to collaborate or may have to collaborate with your competitors under certain conditions for the benefit of all. This is, in fact, a very important ingredient of what we would think of, or I would understand, public interest to be. And at the same time, as you do that, you change, you co-evolve, and you change towards a more effective and efficient set of configurations. So you co-specialize, and the cycle repeats again. So these concepts refer to how that cycle manifests and unfolds. Strategic knowledge serendipity is about the unintended benefits of enabling knowledge to spill over between employees, groups, and functional domains, what we call happy accidents in learning. and more specifically describes the capacity to identify, recognize, access, and integrate knowledge assets more effectively and efficiently to derive, develop, and capture non-appropriable, defensible, sustainable, and scalable pecuniary benefits. In simple English, this is about how being in a certain network or an ecosystem, you come across things you didn't expect, you were not looking for. And, you know, in our research with intelligent agents modeling and so forth, we've modeled the East Coast Boston area versus the Silicon Valley area versus other areas as innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems. And there is, we'll discuss next, there are clear findings, there's clear messages there. The quality and maturity of an ecosystem defines and determines whether and how it will become more successful or not, and for that matter, sustainable, financially, socially, and environmentally. And so that has serious implications for many parts of the world where governments throw money at problems. They invest in creating poles of excellence or competitiveness and so forth, and they try to basically emulate, recreate Silicon Valleys. And it's like gardening. You can't just make a garden happen. You need time, patience, and persistence to put together different ingredients and help nurture it, help nurture its growth. Then the arbitrage effect is about the ability to distribute and use specific knowledge for applications other than the intended topic areas or lateral use applications, create, identify, reallocate, and recombine knowledge assets to derive, develop, and capture non-appropriable, defensible, sustainable, and scalable pecuniary benefits. So now, if you have the happy accidents, again, thanks to the quality, scale, and scope of your networking and who is in your network, you may have the ability to truly make a killing, basically, and have this arbitrage capability vis-a-vis your other competitors of yours that may be outside the particular network. Operationalizing this whole approach can greatly benefit from crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, and crowdstorming modalities, because it's about these are tools, social media modalities in a way for supporting the gardening, as I called it, effect. Patient innovation gardeners. Reminds me of some time ago when there was the crisis in Europe again, and people were talking about the countries in trouble. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, and Spain, they called them the pigs. And I said, well, we may also want to think about patient innovation gardeners, another acronym, another way to have an acronym, the word pigs, to be a more constructive way to figure out a way out of the problem. So smart cities is a case in point of how a particular ecosystem of innovation entrepreneurship can be embedded geographically, but also socially and architecturally, and where you can have high density effects of population, but also other assets. We talk about the different knowledge assets. And this can have higher order effects that are very substantial. Okay. So it's important to have, in this sense, in our design thinking, agile design thinking approach, triple top line, meaning effective, efficient, and ethical, as well as triple bottom line, environmental, financial, and social sustainable considerations, and how we define our metrics. Now here is an example of an ecosystem, and the small circles, this shows macro, meso, and micro level snapshot, so to speak, of an ecosystem, meaning at the national level, sectoral, and local levels. And the the building blocks. This is sort of a fractal, it's meant to be a fractal design. The building blocks, the small circles are the building blocks, effectively people, culture, and technology bundles, which could be companies or research centers and so forth, as I discussed earlier. And in this sense, one could envision universities in the manner that I described as fractal research, education, and innovation ecosystem configurations, but also other components of government, public sector, or private sector threads or dimensions of the society and the economy. So again, the bundles that I mentioned, people, culture, and technology, these are the ingredients of the building blocks of this fractal approach and business model, and the way they coexist, co-compete, co-evolve, and co-specialize, both concerning its individual bundle and how they interact with each other, is guided by certain principles aiming towards more effective and efficient design solutions. Here we therefore talk about business model innovation that aims to be robust, remunerative, and resilient. This is the R3. So there's again related literature and research on that. And this is a view, a perspective on how knowledge, the basic inputs to economic activity, knowledge, technology, entrepreneurship, land, labor, and capital are combined. They're sort of synthesized through effects of co-opetition, co-evolution, co-specialization to produce results like firms that grow, are more profitable, and so forth. And this is a sort of an outside the box view of how you have an input-output perspective on an ecosystem, and the more mature it is, obviously, the more effective and efficient it becomes. Now, there is also sort of an outreach in the sense of diplomacy kind of perspective that would be very useful in our context. So we have science and cultural, but also innovation diplomacy. This could be connecting countries as well as different networks and groups within across countries. All of them serving the mission priority of smart, sustainable, and inclusive growth. And then another example of a use case, how this could be useful, is an area where we've been looking into how to best support, integrate displaced people. And these, we have been looking at this regarding, of course, and concerning a major challenge for many countries in Europe, but also you have a border. We have a border to the south of the US, and you have a border in Arizona where human misery visits daily and nightly. And, what we're discussing here could be put to good use in that sense. To figure out ways to better integrate people, and of course, thinking of displaced people in a broader sense. So I talk about those social, economic, and political refugees that may be not just coming from outside a country, but may well be indigenous in a way. So we need to address both of these. I don't have time to discuss that in more detail. This is a use case and something we've been working on. Another case is with, of course, the core of information technology and AI applications. In fact, there's a handbook on cyber defense, development, and democracy we have. And we have forthcoming, actually, 2 handbooks on AI, innovation, entrepreneurship, and another one on cyber defense, development, democracy, and diplomacy, so cyber D4. But this looks at whether and how, in fact, cyber security, as we call it, in some ways I can talk about, I've written and presented about cyber insecurity, can actually best serve, again, the public interest technology perspective can best serve cyber defense, cyber development, and cyber democracy priorities. And this is sort of a mental map, if you wish, looking at different looking at the dynamics of different components where big data analytics can help provide and support entrepreneurial performance, produce and support sustainable entrepreneurship, but also achieve robust competitiveness using analysis, learning competencies, and real-time data, information and knowledge analysis, and then learning competencies. We talked about earlier the smart cities. This is again another mental map of the how the different components in the design of a smart city, looking at the different issues that one needs to take into account. And then going back to my smart development book in 2005, there are effectively three dimensions or three perspectives one needs to take into account: economic, organizational, and technological, looking at your options and the challenges and opportunities that you have for leapfrogging development, looking at both at all high, medium, and low tech issues, and then for-profit, not-for-profit, and public-private international configurations in developed, emerging and developing economies. I'll go quickly over this. These are slides about the Mode 3 knowledge production systems, and you see at the heart of it is the higher education system. And we talk about the concept of the academic firm in our writings, effectively entrepreneurial startups that help connect, interface the university with the world, the market, and society. And of course, that is a sort of a complement of the what we call the entrepreneurial university, where that we see here, where, of course, we need to remember that entrepreneurial doesn't mean, in a narrow sense, profit maximizing. It means benefit maximizing for stakeholders, not profit maximizing for stock owners. Okay, so this is, again, the different components in the smart cities context where the quadruple helix could enable the design and development of a smart city, university sector, industry, government, and civil society sector. In fact, we have done sort of thought experiments, if you wish, or pilot studies, bringing stakeholders from all four areas in given cities and trying to model what a smart city future might be for that particular city in different parts in Europe, with interesting results. I mean, people got to talk with each other, and that brought an interesting dynamic and insights by just taking that initiative. And then we had follow-ups that were very interesting. There's actually a methodology for developing solutions, starting with co-creation workshops, funding and pooling resources, qualitative research experiments, pilots, quantitative research, and then commercialization and scaling of these solutions. This is what I talked about, the pilots, smart city envisioning, futures envisioning exercise. This is the graphic from our research on the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystems and how the mature ones, in fact, were sources of value creation. If you are immature, however, you end up destroying value. And so it's like throwing money down a sinkhole, and entrepreneurs intuitively know that, and they avoid such cases. But once you get to maturity, sufficient critical mass of maturity, then that things change dramatically, exponentially, as you say. Just some, this is part of our nitty-gritty design approach with the intelligent agents and the design of the ecosystem, and sort of dynamic modeling of this this approach, this process. And again, that has been published in an IEEE paper. So we have knowledge acquisition formality, knowledge serendipity, knowledge arbitrage, and network typology. These are the four mechanisms of knowledge appropriation. What I said already, in some regard, I've already covered this part, but this is about the university's 5.0 vision, about reinventing themselves and a balanced techno and human-centric. So let me give me a moment to just silently go through these slides that I think relate and should inform our thinking and action. This is about Martin Luther King's Have a Dream speech, and this is JFK's We Choose to Go to the Moon. And then this is a poem, this is in German, this is a poem from the 30s about how the thoughts are free, basically implying that, autocracy and tyranny cannot stop you from having free thoughts. Again, from a technological point of view, we're at a point where this actually is changing. Technology may actually soon be able to read our thoughts, and this could be of concern. And I'm closing with this about Plato, about philosophers needing to be kings, otherwise we're in trouble, or rather kings needing to be philosophers otherwise. So interesting issue concerning actually the passing of the Queen in Britain and all the festivities that followed. Thank you all for your time. I hope there was some value added in all this. And again, I appreciate your opportunity, to connect, and happy to come back if you want me.
We would love you to come back. There are lots of cheers and thanks coming through in the chat. I hope you get a chance to read them before we imminently end the call. But I just wanted to say what an incredible preparation that was for us at the PIT Colloquium. Elias, we're so honored. It's not just, PIT doesn't draw just academics, but academics with feeling, academics with wisdom. And your life's work has been traveling down this path for a long time. There's not a class that goes by at ASU. I don't think a single one of your papers is not mentioned, but the what, the how, and the why is what you showed us. These big picture frameworks, these big picture trends, the ability to potentially mobilize resources at that international level, but with a global and local emphasis where change is ever present in proximity. We can see it happening before us. It's a thanks to the appreciative theories, but also understanding how we can go from these principles right through to design and then action towards formal methods. You have formalized some of these things, and we have seen them in your cases. It's not just concepts that you're teaching and putting forward. So how to make this change with initiatives like the New Earth Initiative. You talked about strategies, policies, practices, politics. You talked about things that we can't predict and what we do about them. You talked about the importance of democracy, peace, and the environment, balancing the upwards motions with the downwards, the top down with the bottom up, learning how to learn, you said, and understanding what that means in the quadruple and quintuple and beyond helices. You introduced to us UTOHA and scarce, I should pronounce it. You talked about the importance of digitalisation and the impact and disruption that's had, going from the socio-technical, socio-economic, socio-political, and warning us, right, about the discourse that it seems to have been dissolved by these pressures by new technologies, the movement and trends from technocentrism to human centricism, from the 4.0 to 5.0, You talked to us also about Risk 5.0, about the new technologies. You also talked about the, not the triple bottom line, but the quadruple bottom line. And you insisted on public, private, people, and planet coming into the equation. And the fifth dimension, the environment, that we can't forget, because without the environment, there is no human species, there are no species, full stop. So I want to say a big thank you on behalf of the class. I think there is a window of opportunity that we can invite you back in late October to go through a series of questions. We even had questions from the audience, but I do want us to talk about systemization of services and projects. And I want to talk about smart cities more and this notion of the new ecosystem of innovation. You are truly a transdisciplinary scholar. You've really stretched us today, but provided it with us these models and these frameworks that we should all be familiar with when we're talking about enacting long-term change, not this knee-jerk reaction towards profit maximization. So with that, I want to say thank you to the audience of who's been able to remain behind. We have almost 30 people here. And Professor, thank you for your time and your energy over the decades of your research. There's so much more to unpack in the coming colloquium with you.
I thank you so much for this. I'm really moved by your comments and the opportunity and recognition. I definitely want to schedule more interactions. Perhaps people can review some of the materials and the discussion and the recording, and then develop further streams of thought and come back to address the questions you already outlined for me, as I requested, and thank you for doing that. I promise to actually look at those and send you some comments that you can share with everybody. And I'm happy to schedule another chat. And we are at a juncture. If in closing, if I may,
yes,
you know,
please.
I was born in Greece. My grandfather was in the U.S. and became American, a naturalized American 25 plus years ago. So I'm European by birth and American by choice. I feel that our democracies are at very critical juncture points along with the climate. And to me, therefore, this is not just an interesting kind of research to keep busy. This is about truly our future. And I really hope we can come up with some useful enough insights to influence and impact policymakers, those kings that need to become more philosophical, whether elected or not. We have to do all we can to inject philosophy into them. That's my parting shot, so to speak, and thank you.
Thank you. And we totally agree with you. And that's why we'll have you back and really get into those questions and have people participate. You know, we've got people on the chat who said they woke up at 4 a.m. Every moment of this presentation was worth it. What an education you've provided for us. Thank you so much to everyone who's come and given their thanks. The YouTube for this video will be available within the next 2 weeks. And so look out for it on the SFIS playlist for public interest technology. And we will definitely have Professor Elias Carayannis back for a part 2 in the not too distant future. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely day.
Great. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye now, everyone.